All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Arash Asher, Dr. Michael Meyers, and Dr. Bill Harris about a paper recently published called Blood Omega-3 Fatty Acids and Death from COVID-19, a Pilot Study. COVID-19 is obviously a very hot topic, and this is one of the first, if not the first paper to have actual data on omega-3s and their potential relationships for risk of death from COVID. So, shall we begin? Let's begin with introductions. Dr. Arash, would you like to, or Dr. Asher, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you for organizing this. And my name is Arash Asher. I'm actually a cancer rehabilitation and survivorship specialist. And I'm here at the Samuel Ocean Comprehensive Cancer Center at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And I'm really delighted to have been able to collaborate with our colleagues on this project that I'm looking forward to talking about. So thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Meyers, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Michael Meyers. I'm a physician going back to graduating medical school way back in the 70s and was in private practice for a number of years. My expertise is in weight management, specifically the way the brain regulates the way the body manages its weight. And part of that involved the use of long-chain omega-3s, specifically DHA, to facilitate increase in fullness. However, long-chain omega-3s such as EPA and DHA have a lot of biologic activity in different regards. And when the COVID epidemic started, it was a little ironic. I was walking back from dropping off something to somebody, and it occurred to me, wait a second, the problems that we're seeing with COVID-19 are related to what are called a cytokine storm, or release of substances, which we'll get into a little bit later. And so that's how my involvement started.
Excellent. And Dr. Harris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Bill Harris with the Fatty Acid Research Institute in Sioux Falls. I'm part of this team because I know Mike. We go back for several years, and then he connected me with Arash, and this little idea got cooked up. So I'm an omega-3 researcher. I invented the omega-3 index along with Dr. Von Schacke some 15 years ago. And I've been studying the omega-3 connection with disease outcomes for a long time. And this is an exciting new field for us.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Kristina Jackson. I'm at Omega Quant. I'm a PhD in nutrition and a registered dietitian. And I help coordinate studies that we run at Omega Quant with all kinds of partners, such as Dr. Asher. So our research team did the analysis for this study. And I also am Dr. Harris's daughter. So that's how I got into it. Yes, so let's get into the paper and the study design. We know generally it's about omega-3s and COVID. Dr. Asher, do you want to go ahead and start taking the reins here on telling us a little bit about the study, how you thought of it, and how it came to, you got it done.
Well, I'd be happy to start. And so, as I mentioned, I'm a cancer survivorship specialist. I'm not an omega specialist. I'm not a COVID specialist. And I think this kind of got started because being in the cancer arena, we've learned, and I think this is for most things in health, that many of the issues we see in cancer, in my area, it's cancer fatigue or chemo brain symptoms and other sometimes pain syndromes, and even cancer itself seems to be driven by inflammation, or Mike used the word cytokines. And for many of our chronic health problems today, all seem to stem, at least in part, from excessive inflammation and cytokines. And so Mike Meyers, who I view as a mentor in kind of pushing me, he's been pushing me to study inflammation and the role of omega-3 for certain cancer outcomes. I remember he called me on the phone one day and said, we really should connect with Bill Harris and look at the relationship between omega-3 and COVID outcomes. And that's kind of how this triangular relationship started. I should mention just really quickly that we did work with Bill previously on looking at the relationship between omega-3 index scores and chemo brain symptoms, and even with the small study found an association. So in a way, this was kind of an extension of our previous collaboration in that way.
Excellent. Mike, do you want to, or Dr. Meyers, do you want to tell us how you got involved with the study as well?
Well, as I mentioned initially, I was literally walking back, sort of daydreaming after dropping something off. And I was thinking about the COVID, what was going on with COVID-19. This was late March, early April of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic really hit the United States. And it was becoming obvious that you didn't know who was going to do well and who wasn't going to do well. I mean, it seemed haphazard, and much of the problems that we were seeing with COVID-19 related to excessive inflammation. When you get an infection or when you get a viral infection, the body produces substances to help fight the infection. But if the body releases too much of these substances, which are referred to as cytokines, these inflammatory compounds, it damages vital organs. And that's what we were starting to see with the people that were severely ill with COVID-19. COVID-19 was causing these dysregulation, this overproduction of these what are called inflammatory cytokines, and they were causing severe problems, lung problems, heart problems, and a lot of people were passing away. And so it sort of dawned on me, well, wait a second, what can we do to control cytokines? Because we know that you are what you eat, essentially, and these when you take in certain fats, they get incorporated into the cells, and they get metabolized and cause different compounds. And substances like the very long chain omega-3, such as EPA and DHA, commonly found in fish, but also can be a vegetarian source. These substances tend to lead to anti-inflammatory compounds, and actually compounds that actively fight the inflammation. They're called inflammation resolving mediators, IRMs. And if you have higher intakes of these, of the EPA and DHA, you will have higher levels of these anti-inflammatory compounds and these IRMs. And so the question came, geez, are people that are not doing as well from COVID-19, do they have lower levels of EPA and DHA? And that is causing, part of the problem. So we went about, I contacted Arash Asher and Bill Harris, and we started putting together a study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember there's been a lot of review articles out saying it makes sense that omega-3s would help with the COVID response, but this is kind of the first actual data we have to confirm some of these hypotheses. So, Dr. Asher, do you want to talk about maybe some of the patients that you were able to get blood from, and how you were able to, what they're like, and what kind of data you have on them as far as their COVID?
So briefly, this is, of course, yeah, and it was a relatively straightforward design, and what we were fortunate to have here at Cedars was what's called the biorepository, which basically meant when people who were diagnosed with COVID and came into the hospital, when they had their labs drawn for checking their blood counts and whatnot, the leftover amount was saved in a freezer. And we were able to take a drop of these samples of blood from patients who were diagnosed with COVID and came into the hospital, and without having to draw blood or go through other regulatory issues, we were able to send this drop of blood to Dr. Harris's team. They analyzed it for the omega-3 index, And then with our kind of limited initial budget, we were able to look at certain variables like what sex they were, how old they were, whether they died or survived, and able to come up with these preliminary analyses that I hope we're going to talk about in a moment.
Dr. Harris, do you want to start us off with talking about some of the top line results?
Sure. I guess the top line result is that when we, as Dr. Asher said, we had 100 people that we had blood on. It was a pretty random pick of people that had blood saved and who were admitted with COVID. We measured their omega-3 index, and then we ranked them from the highest to the lowest omega-3 index. So we had 100 people, we ranked them. And then we looked at divided them into quartiles, 25, 25, 25, 25. And then we simply looked within each of those quartiles to see what percent of the people died in those quartiles. We found in the highest quartile, which was above 5.7% on the omega-3 index. Omega-3 index is the amount of EPA and DHA in red blood cell membranes. And we think a good target is like 8%. The average American is somewhere in 4 to 5%. Part of the challenge of this study was trying to get a wide range of omega-3 index, which we really didn't get, because that's just America, or maybe this Los Angeles, I'm not sure. But 5.7% was above that was the fourth quartile. And we found one person died in that quartile. 66-year-old male who, and that's all we know about him. And then there were the bottom three quartiles, there were 13 people died. 14 people died out of the 100 altogether. So when we did the statistics and adjusted for age and sex and that sort of thing, we found that there was the people in the highest quartile, highest 25%, were 75% less likely to die from COVID than those in the lower three quartiles. So it was kind of a threshold effect in a sense. You had to have a level above 5.7%. So that was the sum and substance of it.
And so as the omega-3 expert, do you think the higher omega-3 index is as a major player in lowering this risk for death? Does this agree with a lot of the other literature that's not an infectious disease? Does it make sense from your angle?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're just finishing, actually we're in second round of reviews in a large meta-analysis of 17 different studies looking at the omega-3 level in the blood as a predictor of death from any cause. But we're not just talking COVID, just death from anything. And we've got, 42,000 people, 15,000 deaths in this cohort, and we see a very clear relationship. The higher the omega-3 level in across these multiple studies, lower risk for death. So again, not necessarily the COVID context, but the same general idea. We've seen it before.
And are there any other omega-3 and COVID studies going on, maybe treating with omega-3s or looking at blood levels?
I know there are roughly 18 trials. Last I saw, there were 18 trials related to, I think, treating with omega-3. And I don't know the details of any of them. I'm a little skeptical that when admitting somebody to the hospital with COVID and then start loading them up with omega-3 is going to have enough time to have an effect. To me, this is the high omega-3 when you come in is what you want. Yeah. Basically, you want your background diet to be high in omega-3, whether it's supplements or fish, so that you generally protect it. This is more of a prevention, in my view, than a treatment. Mike, you got some thoughts on that?
I was going to express a concurrence with you because it's, it takes time for these substances to be formed. And it takes time for the very long chain omega-3s, EPA and DHA, to get incorporated into cell membranes so that they can act. Act on the inflammatory molecules. And some of it, what you take in, has an immediate effect. But again, we don't know exactly the time sequence, but it's going to take time. So basically, this would be something to help. If you take it in advance, if you modify your diet to a better diet, you may be helping yourself, helping prevent yourself from, succumbing to COVID-19. God forbid you come down with it. Yeah, it's in a sense a inexpensive preventative measure. So.
Yeah, and it would be very interesting to see, because these were all blood levels from people who were sick enough to come to the hospital in the first place. And if you had a population where it's a more general population and ideally a large spectrum of omega-3 levels, then you would maybe even see, if you have high omega-3, maybe the desirable 8 to 12%, you're not even going to the hospital. You're not getting to that point. So we had just the sickest folks coming in, and they had lower levels, but this is not an abnormal blood level to have 5.7% being the top 75%, the 75% and higher of blood levels is not surprising to me for the United States. Yeah,
the number of people, when I was looking at the data, that had 8% or higher in our study population was minuscule. There were just a few of them, so there's not enough data to really analyze. Which is sort of unfortunate that, that's the status of the Western civilization, the Western diet.
Yeah.
So,
we're kind of alluding to this, is that we want more data points. So Dr. Asher, is there a plan to follow up and add more to this study, or to do a follow-up study?
So we are working as a team to do a follow-up study. And then we have to emphasize, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, that with these types of studies, there's always the concern of whether this is an association or if it's causation. It's impossible based on what we did. Maybe the people that had higher omega levels exercised better and didn't smoke and had other lifestyle factors that theoretically could have accounted for these benefits. So we need to take a deeper look, and what we're proposing for the next study, which we're raising funds for now, is to look at a larger group of individuals, 500 people, so we could have more data. And we need to take a deeper dive into who had diabetes and who was obese and who were smokers and who had cancer and other medical comorbidities that we need to carefully account for to make kind of more rational conclusions.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. So there's a question here, if you think that this type of study would support dosing people with omega-3s once they got to the hospital, but we already kind of covered that. That's not really what this kind of study is saying. Dr. Harris, do you want to kind of wrap up again what looking at blood levels is telling us versus talking about omega-3 supplementation or intake?
Right. And just briefly, again, we're talking about a blood level upon admission to the hospital. That's what we saw. So obviously that blood level was established outside before they got to the hospital. And that's where Dr. Meyers was mentioning. This is a diet, a whole lifestyle, perhaps a lifestyle, but certainly an intake of EPA and DHA has got to be higher than it typically is in America to get the protective levels. And that's our hypothesis in these studies, that we're talking about prevention, not treatment at this point.
And Bill, what you neglected to mention there is when we did the omega-3 index, that's a look back over 60 to 90 days instead of just one reading. So we're getting a look back of, basically how well, how good a diet, or how well they were doing on, taking in their omega-3s, or what they were eating, long term, not just, an instant in time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I found amazing when I was looking at the data is on the highest quartile, the people that were that did the best and had the highest omega-3 index levels. We had a 100-year-old that was a do not resuscitate, and a 90-plus-year-olds that survived. And they survived without respirators. So I was kind of surprised about that. But again, is it an association or causation? don't know at this point. So
I do think we need to emphasize that we're not trying to say that omega-3 is the beginning and end of treatment for COVID. It's one factor that
one fact,
definitely
definitely.
can do something about.
Yeah. And that's the case with basically
Everything.
all of nutrition studies is
Right.
we do break down into nutrients so we can study them, because that's how we know best to study things in science, is to try and decrease the amount of variables. But nutrition is always integrative. It always is one piece of the puzzle. And it's I think more difficult personally than studying drugs, because everybody has eats them and has different levels in their body all the time. And so it's really complicated, but it's interesting to finally have real data in people to look at this question of, does omega-3 help with COVID symptoms? So that's a great benefit that we have, and we hopefully will get more data out there so we can really answer the question and move beyond hypothesizing that it seems like it should. So as you've said, you're looking to do a larger study and actually trying to basically crowdfund support for this study in some ways. So if people would like to help support the study, how would they go about doing that?
At present, there is on our website with Fatty Acid Research Institute's website, which is, I suppose we can put it somewhere in the talk, but it's www.faresinst.com. We have a page where we're taking donations to try to get enough money to do the next study. So people can certainly go to Fatty Acid Research Institute and donate there. We've also talking with some folks at Cedars-Sinai that may be able to donate through that institution as well. Arash, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, just very briefly, we're working on creating a platform to allow for direct donations to Cedars, but whether it comes here or to the Fatty Acid Institute, I think it's a targeted amount of, limited amount of funds that we need, and we hope we can move quickly and get the information out to the public. And I totally agree with you that this is just one puzzle, but it's a piece that, you know, we as individuals have some control over. And given how helpless I know many people feel, I think it would be an important question to try to answer.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. I feel like that's perfect context for this. Thank you guys so much for talking about the study and how it came together, and trying to do research quickly, which has been changed so much about research here in the COVID age. So appreciate everyone's ability to get this study done and get this information out there, and hopefully we can keep looking at this question.
I should mention the paper has now been accepted at a peer-reviewed journal called Prostaglandins, Leukotrienes, and Essential Fatty Acids. It's a mouthful, but we call it PLEFA, is the journal that's going to be publishing the final paper.
Yeah. I want to mention one other thing, that none of us are taking any money from this. In fact, most of us have put money into the study to help pay for the various analyses and, you know, the other people that work on it, you know, through the hospitals. So we're not soliciting money for ourselves. We're soliciting money to just help support the infrastructure so we can do the study. We're
Right.
volunteering times. So, and our and money.
I 100% agree. Yeah, thank you, Mike.
There should be probably the information about what exactly the money would go to on the FARI website, I would think. But yeah,
I can tell you two things. It goes to laboratory analysis, statistical analysis, and obtaining the samples from the hospital biobank.
that's right.
That's right. That's right.
Good thing for your buck.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and we'll look forward to the data coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.